تابوت پہ حسن کے پیکاں برس رہے ہیں، تابوت پہ حسن کے امت مٹا رہی ہے آثار پنجتن کے، پیکاں برس رہے ہیں، تابوت پہ حسن کے۔ پر محمد وآل محمد صلوات
اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد۔
یہ جنازہ ہے حسن کا، وارث تطہیر کا، یہ جنازہ ہے حسن کا، یہ جنازہ ہے حسن کا، وارث تطہیر کا، یہ جنازہ ہے حسن کا۔ ہائے بھائی مر گیا ہے زینب و کلثوم کا، یہ جنازہ ہے حسن کا۔ غم علی کی بیٹیوں کے پھر سے تازہ ہو گئے، غم علی کی بیٹیوں کے پھر سے تازہ ہو گئے، پھر سے تازہ ہو گئے، غم ابھی بولی کہاں تھی مادر دلگیر کا، یہ جنازہ ہے حسن کا، یہ جنازہ ہے حسن کا، وارث تطہیر کا، یہ جنازہ ہے حسن کا۔ فاطمہ زہرا کی مرکز سے صدا آنے لگی، فاطمہ زہرا کی مرکز سے صدا آنے لگی، سے صدا آنے لگی، یہ مصائب رہ گیا تھا کیا میری تقدیر کا، یہ جنازہ ہے حسن کا، یہ جنازہ ہے حسن کا، وارث تطہیر کا، یہ جنازہ ہے حسن کا۔ نانا امت نے تیری دونوں پہ برسائے ہے تیر، نانا امت نے تیری دونوں پہ برسائے ہے تیر، دونوں پہ برسائے تیر، وہ جنازہ ہو حسن کا یا بدن شبیر کا، یہ جنازہ ہے حسن کا، یہ جنازہ ہے حسن کا، وارث تطہیر کا، یہ جنازہ ہے حسن کا۔ اور محمد وآل محمد صلوات
اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد۔
Peace and blessings be with you. I hope you are all well. This year, the 72 for 72 campaign for Who's Hussein is slightly different. Yes, we are raising awareness for homelessness, as we always do every single year, year in, year out. With millions of people around the world that are displaced, living rough on the streets. Right here in London, over 8,000 people every single night sleep rough on the streets of London. It's our duty to raise awareness, it's our duty to make people aware of what's going on, and we do this alongside marking the 72 martyrs of Karbala, and we'll be doing this also to remember the 72 victims of Grenfell, the 72 that perished in that fire. So this year, the campaign looks a little bit different because of the COVID pandemic. We cannot go out on the streets and we cannot spend 72 hours on the streets, but we're looking for your help and your support. We need a minimum of 72 people to sign up to spend one night, Saturday, October the 3rd. Spend one night away from your bed, sleeping somewhere in your house that's uncomfortable. It may be on the floor, in the kitchen, in the bathroom, in the bedroom. It may be on the floor in the garden. You may spend the night in the garden. Somewhere where it is uncomfortable for yourself, so you can experience what it's like to sleep on the hard floor and depriving yourself from the luxuries like pillows, duvets, the soft bed. Hopefully, you will gain an aspect of what it feels like to be homeless, to be away from your bed and from your room, but doing it also safe, in the comfort of your own homes, because of the COVID risks and the risk of the pandemic spreading. If you do sign up, and we're hoping that you do sign up, that you will be given two names, one of the martyrs of Karbala and also one of the victims of Grenfell, and you'll be dedicating that night to them. We would ask you to post videos and to post pictures of your experiences and what it was like for you throughout the course of the evening. Why not deprive yourself from food and water like many homeless people do, just for that one night, and just feel the pains of hunger, the pains of thirst. Together we can make a difference. Together we can make a stance. This year we are doing it slightly different, and we need your support. We are looking for a minimum of 72 people. Please do sign up. Email london@whoishussein.org. That's london@whoishussein.org, and sign up for your interest. We would love for you to join this campaign and raise awareness for the people that are our neighbours that sleep rough every single night. Thank you so much for your time and listening.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون الذي لا يدركه بعد الحمم ولا يناله غوص الفطن ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وشفيع ذنوبنا سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم وآل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين صاحب العصر والزمان خليفة الرحمن إمام الإنس والجان ولعن الله وأعداهم أجمعين إلى يوم الدين أما بعد فقد قال الله وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألم أحد إليكم يا بني آدم أن لا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. First of all, we send our condolences to the Imam of our time, the Maraje, all of you and your respective families, on tonight being the Shab and the eve of the Shahadat of Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba alayhi salatu wassalam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to give us that tawfiq to love the Ahlul Bayt, follow the Ahlul Bayt, inshallah become the true Shi'as of the Ahlul Bayt. A little bit about our second Imam, the only Imam that was born in the month of Ramadan, in the 15th of Ramadan he was born, and his Shahadat dates, there are various traditions. One, of course, is the date that is tomorrow, the 7th of Safar. The other one that is commonly sometimes commemorated is the 28th of Safar. Regardless, nonetheless, he is born in Medina and one of the 4 Imams buried in Baqi in Medina as well. He is one of those Imams that I often say every year, and maybe I'm incorrect, that not only do we not know much about him, but the amount of negative propaganda against this Imam is well documented. Unfortunately, there have been several false reports about his character, about his lifestyle. One, for example, is that he's been given the title of Mitlaq, and it's not a very good title. Mitlaq is somebody who is a habitual divorcer of women. There's one historian that would say that Imam Mujtaba in the span of his life married and divorced 70 different women. All, of course, false accusations. All, of course, tuhmat and slander against a very beautiful individual. The one thing about Imam Mujtaba that I wish, if it was my topic, I'd expand on, is the fact that he was very well known for his generosity and his sakhawat. 3 times in his life, he gave away half of his wealth to those who were unfortunate, or less fortunate, sorry. And this very famous Dastakhan of Imam Hassan, that sometimes is, practiced as a sunnat or a custom in some of our communities, actually stems from this idea that he used to have an open door policy in terms of feeding those who were in need. He would oftentimes sit with them at their dastakhan, their sufra, their food spread, and they would come and sit with him as well. So inshallah, we should do our best on these days of his waladat, and of course on the shab of his shahadat, to take a moment to learn a little bit more about him. And inshallah, in the Masaib, we'll speak tonight a little bit about the musibat of his last few moments in his life. Our discussion since last night here with all of you at Hyderi has been about this concept of a me-centric life, the dangers of it, the struggles of it. And last night we spoke a little bit about the idea that we have to accept the fact that there are factors and there are dimensions and there are powers inside of us that we simply have to learn to fight and struggle against and rebel against and stand up against. That just because it is natural inside of us doesn't mean that at all times, under and every circumstance, it should be explored. And the example I gave you last night was, for example, anger and desire, and the idea that anger is a very natural emotion, and Islam has no problem with the existence of these faculties. Where Islam does have a conversation is about the expression of these faculties. Where and when, of course, to be angry, how to be angry, where and when, of course, to fulfill our desires. But it does not say that all of anger is wrong and all of desire is corrupt. No. And the reason why I built that muqaddamah and that preliminary discussion last night was because one of the things that is innate inside of us that sometimes need to be controlled is this idea that we are in love with ourselves, self-love, self-conceit, the need for applause, the need for recognition, the need for validation from others in our amal and our deeds. While very natural sometimes, and it exists in everybody, that can very quickly become something that becomes a me-centric idea. And what I mean by me-centric life is that we are consumed with ourselves. And part of it, of course, is the idea that we live in an environment where we live in a consumerism environment. And everything is a brand, everything is branding, everything is marketing, everything is consumerism. And it's gotten to the point in the social media world where it's all about branding yourself and promoting yourself. The example I'll give you is growing up in Toronto, I shared my room with my older brother, and we still are big sports fans. But we're big North American sports fans. We're not really into the football like you guys are in the UK and other sports, but we're into North American basketball and North American football and these type of things. And I would remember in our room, on our walls we would sometimes hang up posters, like, typical, teenage room, posters of cars. I would have posters of a Ferrari or a Porsche, let's say. I think about it now, I laugh at myself. Or I'd hang up a poster, let's say, of my favorite basketball player or my favorite baseball player, blah, blah, blah. Now imagine if for a moment now, okay? Now imagine if for a moment now, if somebody was, to have in their room every inch of their wall filled with posters and pictures, but not of cars or of athletes, but of themselves. So I'd walk into a room and there'd be pictures of me all over my wall. On my side table is a picture of me. When I wake up, I see pictures of me in different poses, different locations, different areas, different outfits, happy, sad, pouty, right? All these things, right? Every inch of my wall. And somebody was to walk into my room and say, wow, this is like a shrine for yourself. You're really into yourself. You must really love the way you look, right? And it gives off a very narcissistic, me-centric environment. Well, we kind of do that in our social media, don't we? I mean, ask yourself, I'll ask myself, how many selfies do we have and pictures of ourselves do we have in our social media platform? And it's norm, I get it, it's natural, everyone's doing it, and maybe that's the problem. Maybe in this branding era, we have seen ourselves as a brand that I need to promote to others. And I need someone to now give me acceptance of my brand. And the amount of followers and subscribers I have, for example, all are customers of mine buying into my brand. In the process now, what ends up happening is that we kind of focus on the I and the individual. And very quickly we become in love with ourselves and we become narcissistic. Now, that trickles into our worship. Now, when that same individual, that everything about them is them and them and them and them and them, and Allah is saying for you to submit to me as a slave, that transition is a very, very difficult one. So yeah, we'll go up and down in salat, ruku and sujood, but that tranquility, that khushu', that huzur qalb, the presence of the heart, all of that, of course, is void. We end up praying for 30, 40 decades, 30, 40 years, and all of this idea of mi'raj and ascension and hijrat and the idea that, salat is tanha anil fahsha'i wal munkar, it's supposed to remove, indecency and evil from us. I mean, there are people who have been praying their entire life, and the more they pray, the more indecent they're becoming. So something isn't right? There's a disconnect here somewhere. Now, we can talk about a lot of factors. In my short 3-lecture series, all of you, tonight being lecture number 2, I want to make sure we understand the dangers of this me-centric idea. If we continue now to feed the beast of the I inside of me, then what ends up happening is that the I becomes the idol. It becomes a ma'bud. It becomes the point of our worship. And once you've identified A to be a point of worship, B and C and D are very difficult to also label as a ma'bud, as a direction for my worship, where Allah is the only ahad and wahid and unique and one ma'bud in this universe. That now is a secondary point. The primary point is that I need to serve and worship myself. Now, it's all very, very subconscious. Right? Nobody has nobody puts their picture where the Qibla is and puts candles around them and puts the agarbatti and smoke around them and sits there and does dua to their picture. No one does that. But subconsciously, anytime we come across a ruling in the deen or in Islam where I need to sacrifice something, be it the way I look or the way I dress or who I marry or what I eat or who I love or what I drink or what I watch, that sacrifice is what you battling yourself. And if you have elevated yourself to the point where you're an idol to be worshipped, what everyone wants to do is preserve that idol. And the Quran talks about this. I want to present to you a couple of very powerful traditions, ayat today, to bring my point home. The first one is that, the verse I read for you in the khutbah from Surah Yasin, a very famous one. Allah says, did I not, alam ahad ilaykum, did I not admonish you, did I not encourage you, did I not suggest to you, ya bani Adam, O children of shaitan, what? Allah ta'budu shaitan. Don't worship shaitan. Don't worship shaitan. Did I not tell you time and time again, Allah is asking in Surah Yasin? Did I not sit there and recommend to you, suggest to you, through various means, directly, indirectly, to what? To worship shaitan. Innahu lakum عَدُوٌّ مُبِينٌ. He is for you, or this shaitan is for you, an open enemy. Now, tafsir means that, yeah, we could either talk about the external shaitan and his shayateen and his army and his boys and his groupies, or we could talk about what I spoke about last night, and the idea that sometimes the ulama now write shaitan and nafs amara, shaitan and nafs amara, to make us understand, look, not everything is an external deviation. Sometimes we are deviated by the internal powers inside of us. And the problem is that we have voided the idea of the internal misguidance, and we continue now to point fingers at the external misguidance. And we played the blame game very well. If I am not a true follower, it's because of A, B, C, and D. Sometimes dating back to like a bad madrasa teacher when I was, learning Dinyat al-Quran, for example. Or a judgy auntie in the center who'd sit there and, talk about too much makeup, or not the hijab is not right, or why aren't you pregnant yet, or, you're gaining weight, or all these things. And we're just like, you know what, forget it. And for some reason now we, that one instance of a volunteer teacher on Sundays, or this one auntie who's trying to figure out the deen herself, for some reason those two now represent the entire religion. And because these two, for example now, these are simple examples, for these two now, they represent the entire deen, and because it's been horrible with these two, thus the deen is now gone. And the entire life now will hold on to that. Whereas every other science in our life now, we upgrade, right? We learn the new phone, right? We download the latest upgrade from the app, from the iPhone, right? We're able to pair our watch with our phones. We're able to figure out our smart cars, able to figure out, let's say, for example, Zoom right now, for example. Many of the online communities now, since COVID hit, has been figuring out how to, really, truly how to, present a very beautiful AV presentation. All that we upgrade because the demand is there, but we don't upgrade the deen for some reason. Our understanding of Tawheed is what we learned in grade 7 Dinyat class in Sunday school in our madrasa from brother Falan or sister Falan, for example. Now, I'm being general, but that's what happens when the worshipping moves from La ilaha illallah to La ilaha illa ana. There's no God but me. There's no God but me. Right? And now this shaitan that Surah Yasin is talking about, one is possible, the external, but another possible explanation is the nafs inside of us, this me-centric inside of us, this me generation that even the Western world now is talking about, that this privilege now, this coddled, this entitled generation that we are living in right now, where, there is no sort of effort to struggle and sacrifice and think outside of you, has no place in the deen. The deen's name is struggle. The deen's name is sacrifice. The deen's name is to kind of travel outside of you and see what exactly is it that we need. If that means that I need to sacrifice A, B, and C, then so be it, right? Why is it that our marriages are falling apart? A lot of it is that we just don't know how to compromise anymore. Because why? Because the idol is number one in my world, right? You think about all those idol worshippers back then during the Prophet's time, their one job was not only to worship the idol, but to preserve the idol. So they would clean it, they would wipe it, they'd make sure it's safe somewhere. Some actually would put it in like a little bit of a caged, locked area, bring it back out, do their worship, put it back in. Just make sure you preserve the idol, And if anyone comes near, if anyone even suggests that a scratch comes on that idol, then you reject that. Those are physical idols made of wood, or made of food, or made of, clay or dirt, whatever the case may be. I'm talking about the metaphysical idol that's made inside of us as the self. As Rumi says, the mother of all idols is the self. But the same principles of idol worshipping apply. We preserve, and any instance, even a suggestion by someone like me to possibly, put yourself in an uncomfortable position. We're like, wait a second, that means that my idol will not be comfortable. It may even get damaged. I'm not able to get this, for example. Yeah, you're not. This is haram. Yeah, it's haram. All stems from multiple factors now. Multiple factors. One is this social media world, the selfie generation, the me generation. I'm not talking about a certain age. Everyone is prey to it. Everyone is guilty of it. Everyone now is falling victim to it. I mean, there are more elders on Facebook now than there are young guys. Young guys started off Facebook, now they're moving on to Instagram and Snapchat, other tools, and meanwhile the uncles and the aunties now have their Facebook pages and they're, mashallah, they're commenting away. Right? So there's dangers here, guys. There's dangers here. Let's try to understand, what we're doing here. So I want to present to you a couple of verses. The first verse is from Surah Yasin, that's understood. This is your open enemy. This me-centric inside of you, this nafs inside, this nafs ammara inside of you, open enemy of yours. It is your destruction. As good as it feels, right? As great as it feels, as much as you love it, it could be your destruction. وَأَنَا عَسَى تُحِبُّ شَيْئًا وَهُوَ شَرٌ لَكُمْ, the Quran says. It could be that you love something. You adore something. You have hope for something, but it's shar for you. It's evil for you. It's detrimental for you. It's damaging for you. But, we've been kind of raised and we've been told in this generation that, look, it's all about how you feel, right? I don't feel like praying today. I don't feel like wearing hijab. I don't feel like this. And this I has given way too much value to replace God now to the point, right? I think I mentioned last night, if not that I want to mention now, these hijabi influencers right now on social media, who are taking off their hijabs. You ask them why. I mean, this is the same hijab on your head that got you all your followers to begin with. Now that you've reached a certain level of followers and you're monetizing your social media, now the hijab no longer is needed, right? And if you ask them, they all have pretty much the same answer, that I put it on my head, I can take it off. It was my choice to wear it. It's my choice to not wear it. And that statement is kind of the slogan and the billboard for the me-centric generation. An act of worship like wearing hijab has nothing to do with us. It's for God, right? But nowhere in that statement is God even mentioned. I chose to wear it, I will choose to take it off, right? So even the worship that's supposed to be for Allah has turned around and become for me, right? And the reality is that we don't wear hijab for ourselves. Like, I know that sounds odd, but if tomorrow, for example, if tomorrow it's announced that hijab no longer is wajib by any of our sisters to wear a cloth around their head and wear loose-fitting clothing, loose clothing, how many of my sisters would leave their house tomorrow still in the same abaya and hijab? I don't know how many would, right? So a lot of what we do is only for faqat for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If that's the case, there's no I in there. It's complete submission. The slave submits to the master. And yes, the beauty of it is that Allah now sends rewards to us. But ultimately, our ikhlas, the highest level of our ikhlas, is we remove the I from that equation and we do it fi sabilillah. Right? Not for my path, not for me. Now the one verse I want to make sure that we understand today is from Surah Hajj. Verse number 73. And those of you who are following along, one of the advantages now of this online kind of, virtual Majlis world is the fact that you can follow along with me. So Surah Hajj is the 22nd surah of the Quran. It's the 73rd verse. Very beautiful, very powerful verse that I want to make sure that we understand. And I want to break it down to you bit by bit. And I'll tell you why that is. Sometimes we need to be reminded of the might of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I don't mean this might of this ferociousness, this intimidating, might. What I mean is the fact that when we understand His might, His izzat, وَلِلَّهِ الْعِزَّةُ, the Quran says, Surah Tawbah, talks about the fact that Allah is the one that has all the power. He is the one that gives, وَلِرُسُولِهِ وَلِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. He gives to His Rasul, He gives to the believers. Anyways, that might, right, demands the fact that if we want to worship anybody, we should worship Him and Him alone. And by the way, I should mention to you, the Quran doesn't even entertain the idea that we are masterless, right? Some of you might ask, why do I need to worship anybody, right? And it's not my topic, but the Quran says, look, we're bound by the idea that we enslave ourselves to some system, right? Absolute freedom, void of enslavement is a facade, right? And the Quran says that there's no comparison between one who enslaves themselves to one master or one who enslaves themselves to multiple masters. There's no comparison. the one who has chosen that one God to be his Mawla and his Rabb and his Master, is nowhere near any of those individuals who idol worship, right? Imam Ali says there's no bigger sense of fakhr and pride than the fact that I have chosen you to be my Master and my Mawla and my Ma'bud. No bigger sense of pride for this Ali. I could have chosen anything to worship. I chose to worship you. Now, come to the verse. Surah Hajj, verse number 73. Starts off by addressing all of mankind. Ya ayyuhan nas. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ya ayyuhan nas. All mankind. And all of you should know, and I know a lot of you do know, mashallah, Hyderi is, although I've never been there physically, I've heard very, very good things about it. Mashallah, you have now Sayyid Ammar now giving lectures to you, whenever you can on certain events. So obviously, I'm assuming the sat and the level of understanding of the community is quite high. When the Quran does, address all of mankind, then there is a very innate, unifying message that follows that Ya ayyuhan nas. Because that in that Ya ayyuhan nas, of course, are atheists, are Jewish brothers, our Christian brothers, Hindus and Sikhs and Buddhists and ones who ridicule God, and Wahhabis and Shias. Everyone falls into Ya ayyuhan nas. So, understanding that whatever follows Ya ayyuhan nas usually is a unifying sort of an internal 30 discussion inside the Quran. And it's very interesting, God's approach in this verse. Very interesting. Ya ayyuhan nas ضُرِبَ مَثْلٌ فَاسْتَمِعُوا لَهُ, he says. An example has been presented in front of you. This example that he's about to give, it's been presented in front of you. فَاسْتَمِعُوا لَهُ. So listen very, very carefully, right? Sama'a istama'a in Arabic. Sama'a is to hear something. Istama'a is to listen very, very carefully to it. Allah does not mention this is an example given to you by your Lord. Please follow me very carefully. In other areas, right? For example, in Surah Tahrim, Allah talks about the wife of Fir'aun, for example, right? ضرب الله مثل الذين آمنوا امرأة فرعون. This is an example that's been brought to you by Allah. ضرب الله. That's been brought to you by Allah. For who? للذين آمنوا. For the ones who have iman, right? Of the wife of Fir'aun. There he specifically says this example is from God. But this verse of 73 of Surah Hajj does not even mention himself at all. He says, look, there has been an example. ضُرِبَ, right? It's a fairly majhul. It's not important who it is. Just know that there's been an example that's been given, right? What's important is فَاسْتَمِعُوا لَهُ, that you listen very carefully. And then he says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ تَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ لَن يَخْلُقُوا ذُبَابًا وَلَا يَجْتَمِعُوا لَهُ. Beautiful, beginning to the verse. He says that for the ones that you call upon besides God, the ones that you call upon besides Allah, right? The idols, be it the idol outside or the idol inside. And then he uses imagery, and Allah uses imagery up and down. Sometimes he uses rocks. There's an entire verse that talks about the 3 different types of rocks, and how water springs forward from the rocks, and how some rocks now, they fall. يَحْبَدُ مِنْ خَشْيَةِ اللَّهِ. They fall, let's say, for example, out of the fear of Allah, right? And sometimes he uses, of course, trees, and he uses animals, and he uses, and here, in this one, he uses a fly. A magas, as they say in Farsi, a makki, as they say in Urdu. A dhubab, as they say in Arabic. And it's a very bold verse. And as the verse goes on, his boldness almost increases God's. It's quite nice to see this confidence in God, for lack of a better word. And we have to mirror that confidence as believers in God. He says that these individuals that you call upon, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ تَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ, the ones that you call upon that are not God, that are besides Allah, the small g gods, the idols, right? Know that they can never, لَن يَخْلُقُوا, they can never create a dhubab, they can never create a fly, وَلَا يَجْتَمِعُوا لَهُ, even if they were to gather all together into a boardroom. So you put the Amazons and the Googles and the Apples and the IBMs and and everything, all these major players, let's say, for example, the Samsungs, you put them all in one room, the cream of their company, you know, the brainiacs, right? The ones that are brilliant. You put them all in one room, and you pour in billions and billions of dollars from the various companies, all to create one fly. He says, لَن يَخْلُقُوا. They will never. Lan is nafiya abada. They'll never ever be able to create a fly. A fly. A fly, guys. The bzzz against the window, that fly that lands on your barbecue, that you just sit in the swapping away. Because they'll never be able to. Then he goes one step further in the verse. It's quite beautiful. His boldness even increases God's. He says, forget the creation of the fly. He says, وَإِنْ يَسْلُبُهُمُ الذُّبَابُ شَيْئًا. That if that fly was to capture something, right? لا يستنقذوه منه. You can't even get that one thing that he's supposed to, that he captures. The example I'll give you, I've given this example before. You know, I'm talking about barbecue. You know, summertime now. I don't know about the UK, but right now in Toronto, Canada, it's getting a little bit colder at night now, right? The AC is off, and you know, we're starting to kind of put our jackets on and get ready for our brutal winters that we have here in Canada. But in the summertime, it gets nice and hot, right? And so, you know what, you're in the backyard now, and your family's over, and you're sitting there, and you're grilling some hamburgers and some chicken and blah, 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 and this and that. And on the table now, you set up your potato salad and your macaroni salad and your condiments and your, you know, this and that. And I'm getting hungry just thinking about all this. And you're there, and your sibling is there, and your sibling spouse is there, and your sibling's kids are there, and your mom is there, and everyone is there. And the flies are there, uninvited, mashallah. The flies show up. Right? The fly, and now you're sitting there, and the fly lands on top of the hamburgers. You can see it's doing something on the hamburger. Probably checking make sure that my salt and namak and mirchi masala is all okay. And then it flies off. We can't see it, but pretty sure it took a small nibble of the hamburger and took off. That's what Allah is referring to here. That one thing that's, you know, in yaslubuhum, the salb, the very thing that you know, if the dhubab was to take something, a shay, anything, right? Even the smallest thing, they're not, the Amazons, the Googles, they're not even able to get that piece back from the fly, let alone create it. Oh, that's bold, man, that's bold. Forget creation. Get that piece of hamburger back from the fly. Go. See if you can do that. He says you can't. Who are these? إِنَّ الَّذِينَ تَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ. The ones that you call upon besides Allah. The ones that you worship now besides Allah. The ones that you rely on besides Allah. All of them are not able to do all that. They can't create the fly. They can't get that piece of chicken from the... Now, there's no chicken or hamburger in the verse. That's my example. But the idea is that if that fly was to take anything, they're not able for a moment now to bring it back. Not possible. And then he says, ضَعَفَ طَالِبُ وَمَطْلُوبُ. Right? That's when he says, at the end of the verse, the talib is za'if, the matlub is za'if. The one who seeks these small g gods is za'if. The small g gods themselves are za'if. The seeker is weak, the sought is also weak. You're weak for even relying on such a weak system of belief, and that system itself is weak. And this entire verse, and if you look at the verse right after, you know, that's where Allah now, you know, some Mufassirin have called it, have referred to this verse 74, the verse right after, as this tragic tone in the voice of God sometimes. Metaphorically, of course, in the verse. Right? مَا قَدَرَ اللَّهُ حَقًّا قَدَرِهِ. You haven't given Allah His haqq. إِنَّهُ لَقَوِيٌّ عَزِيزٌ. Right? إِنَّكَ لَقَوِيٌّ عَزِيزٌ, I believe. I don't have it, but the idea is that, you know, you have not given Allah His haqq. This entire 73rd verse is to tell you that, look, there's nobody out there worthy to be your ma'bud, to be the point of your worship, except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he uses a simple fly as an example. And the very next verse tells us that his whole point is to tell you, if you want to worship, if I want to worship anybody, only Allah is worthy of that ibadah and that worship. Because what ends up happening is that when we start to believe in a me-centric and I generation, a lot of things happen. Our families fall apart. Our marriages fall apart. Our communities become to fragment, right? We don't have empathy for the amount of dhulm happening and oppression happening all over the world, be it from Yemen or Bahrain, or be it, let's say, for example, from Kashmir to right now in Pakistan. There's so many issues right now all over the Muslim world, and we just kind of, turn a blind eye and just flip the page and say, okay, well, may Allah protect them. Right? And we just kind of go through this idea of eat, sleep, work, repeat, eat, sleep, study, repeat, eat, sleep, play, repeat. And we just kind of go through this idea when in reality Allah is trying to point us to a certain purpose that's way beyond us. Right? إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَذْكُرُونَ اللَّهَ قِيَامًا وَقُعُودًا وَعَلَى جُنُوبِهِمْ. For the ones who remember Allah standing, sitting, and on their side, lying on their side, meaning in all states, they remember Allah. وَيَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. And they stop and they ponder for a moment. They do a little introspection, self-thought on the creation of the heavens and the earth. They say to themselves, they're bound to say to themselves, رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا Subhanaka faqina adhab an-nar. The Quran, very beautiful verse that, sometimes you catch yourself, right, looking at mountaintops and sunrises and sunsets and waterfalls and this beautiful, a garden, let's say, for example, or birds that do something that amaze you, and you're bound to stop and wonder about the creation of things, the precision of this universe. At that moment, the Quran says, you're going to say, Rabbana, our Lord, ma khalaqta hadha batila. There's no way that you created all of this precision and perfection for no apparent reason. There's purpose. There's purpose. And if Allah's intricate, precise, flawless universe has its own avenues of purpose, then we also, as a flawless being in a creation of Allah's, also has purpose. We can't be living our life with eat, sleep, drink, repeat. Can't be. There's got to be more. There's got to be more. But sometimes we have to travel outside of us to get to more. Travel beyond us, beyond the I, to be able to do that. Look, I'll give you an example, okay? Imam Khomeini in his Adab al-Salat, and I just finished reciting 9 lectures on this topic of Salat in a different community. That's why it's a little fresh in my mind, and it's an example that's very, very beautiful. In the world of fiqh, before there was, kilometers and miles, and you're able to kind of, measure, and, they have farasakh and all these things they had before, there's essentially 2 different ways that one could count themselves as a musafir, okay? So their salat becomes qasr, okay? 2 ways that the fiqh says. Number 1 is that, you travel so far from your city that you no longer see the walls of your city, the buildings of your city. Okay? Or you travel so far from your city that you no longer can hear the adhan from the masjid of your city. That was back then, of course, where small towns were separated by miles and miles of bare empty land, right? So you can actually catch yourself to say, okay, I'm far enough now. Or back then where, of course, the adhan could be heard from every center or every corner, wherever there is a place of worship. That was back then. Now, Imam Khomeini uses that example to talk about the I-ness inside of us, the me-centric inside of us, the I, the me inside of us. He says, if we are to be considered to be a musafir and a traveler on the journey towards Allah now, that's a physical a travel distance. This is a spiritual one, right? So make the connection now, right? A metaphysical, spiritual journey up towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are constantly in a journey, right? No, we're not physically moving anywhere, but we are in a constant journey towards Allah. This suluk, this journey that we have, we are a salik, right? We're a traveler, we're a musafir. There has to be signs, he says, of a traveler. If somebody sits there in their room watching television, yeah, I'm on a trip right now. You're on a trip right now. You're inside of your home. I don't understand. No bags packed, no signs of a travel, no boarding pass, no passport, nothing. I don't understand. Give me something, right? Give me a sign of a traveler. We also can claim, oh yeah, I'm traveling towards Allah, but those also have to have spiritual signs as well. And one sign, he says, is that we leave the town of the I-ness inside of us. Oh, it's such a beautiful point. and I pray to Allah to give me tawfiq to make you understand this point. The I-ness inside of us, the me inside of us. Once we leave that town of me spiritually, then we can be considered to be what? A musafir and a traveler towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Otherwise, I'm sorry, sitting inside the home in the cocoon of me and I, claiming that I'm traveling towards Allah doesn't make logical sense. Now, let's use the example of the fiqh now, right? He says that beautifully, very poetically, he writes that when we begin to stop seeing the buildings of the I inside of me, the building of self-conceit and ego, and we stop hearing the adhan of self-praise inside of us, then we can be considered to be a traveler towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have to now break free and leave our comfort home of the I to be able to be considered a traveler towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Otherwise, we're living in our cocoon, we're living in our social media, consumerism, every inch of my wall is covered with pictures of me, right? Every post on Facebook is about me, every selfie out there is about me, right? I have now created a circle of influence around me that sits there and kind of elevates me and flames or fans, let's say for example, my ego, or inflates my ego, right? So I've created a little utopian society around me. Even the things that we follow on social media are things that are, close to how we see the deen. Right? So if we like someone's post that kind of matches and mirrors the way I think I like that person, I subscribe to that channel. In the process now, I'm just surrounding myself with people who are just sitting there inflating my ego and pumping up myself, saying, yeah, because she says it and he says it and they say it, it must be right. And then we claim that, yeah, we're traveling towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're not. We haven't left the home of the I yet. We're still, every wall we see has pictures of me on there. Every praise there is inside of me is about me. How can God fit in anywhere in there? Imam Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, al-qalbu haramallah fala tuskin haramallah ghayrullah. The qalb, where the I resides, is not even the property of the I. It's actually the haram of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the sanctuary of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fala tuskin haramallah ghayrullah. Do not allow anything to reside in that heart, and that haram, except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imagine now, somebody, imagine now, you saying, look, this room is yours. Go ahead. And, whenever you want, here's the keys, you can go outside. And you you have your suitcase now, we're ready to move into this room, and you unlock the door, you open it, and there's pictures of somebody else on the wall. Say, oh, sorry, this must be the wrong room. Someone else is staying here. No, this is your room. It can't be my room. There's pictures of somebody else on every inch of the wall here. Allah opens up our heart and sees us, and pictures of us plastered all over inside of our heart. Not this heart, of course, our essence. And you close it up and say, okay, well, I thought this was my haram. It's not. Let's move on somewhere else. And then we end up asking, how come I'm not elevating? I've been praying salat, for example, worshiping Allah, doing all this for so many years. I'm not getting anywhere. I'm not getting anywhere. You have to leave the home to get somewhere. You have to leave the I-ness to get somewhere. You have to stop seeing the buildings of me. I have to stop hearing my own praise in order for me to praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's the problem with the me-centric lifestyle. There's no room for anybody else. Eventually, that results in isolation. Nobody ever wants to be around somebody who's full of themselves. Nobody wants to be married around a selfish person. Nobody wants to cultivate any sort of family relation with somebody who's just a very selfish person who thinks about themselves, right? Because sacrifice, compromise, doing things for others, service, khidmat, empathy, sympathy, compassion, all of those things are out the window when we live a me-centric life. When it's me, myself, and I. So let's be very careful. Let's understand now that this society is trying to create something inside of us that will ultimately be our demise. And again, I'll say what I said last night, we have to learn to fight that. And fight it, and fight it until the very last breath. Otherwise, accepting social norms, if they are destructive, will become second nature for us. And the problem is that once we adopt those second nature norms as every day, when the Imam of our time comes and attempts to remove those social norms, we won't be so ready to let them go and the battle will ensue internally between us and the Imam, God forbid. But look, I don't think I'm ready for the lifestyle that you're trying to preach, the Imam. But the Imam says, look, I'm a hujjat of Allah, so not nothing on my own. And these are demons, and these are issues that we are facing. And again, I'll say that it is very, very subconscious. And I ask my youth out there, be very, very vigilant, and be insightful, and look around, and be observant about what's happening. Trends that don't need to always be adopted. Everyone's doing it, doesn't matter. I'll use a line that my dad used to use all the time. If everyone jumped off a bridge, would you? I used to roll my eyes, but it's a great advice. I feel like everyone's jumping off the bridge of decency and humanity and compassion and sympathy and empathy and justice. They're jumping off the bridge, and a lot of us are following suit because everyone's doing it. And that's not the way that a mu'min is. A mu'min is a jibal, a mu'min is a mountain, a mu'min is a fada'il, a mu'min is a distinct individual, right? And that's why the imams were individuals throughout their life who had, received the harshest of enemies. And it wasn't that they were looking to just to destroy the imams. They were looking to just, end their life and ruin them and remove them from society at the most difficult ways, using the most difficult ways and the most difficult methodology. And Imam Mujtaba alayhi salatu wasalam is a man who was given poison 7 different times. By different various means. This is that poison. In fact, the last poison that Muawiyah used with his wife Ju'ada was a special poison that he actually had ordered from Rome. And the way that the history books describe this poison, 1 drop of it inside of the ocean, within minutes now every fish would be upside down dead in that water. He attempted 6 different times. Now, can you imagine now 6 different times being poisoned and surviving? Yes, maybe he survived, but the damage on the insides every single day is cutting on the insides of Imam Mujtaba, weakening every organ. Until finally when the 6th time happened and that didn't end the life of Imam Mujtaba, they say that Abul Fazl Abbas, who was very protective of everybody, yes, we have in our books that he was somebody who was obsessed with Imam Hussein, but he also had immense love for everybody else of Imam Ali and Sayyidah Fatima's children. Imam Mujtaba was one of them. He said, Mawla, because he referred to him as Imam, I am now going to not allow anybody to even come near you. Anybody that would come and give a delivery of food, let's say, for example, it would be wrapped in poison or drowned in poison. And now Abul Fazl says, now it's me. I'm going to guard and make sure that nobody from the outside goes anywhere near you. And when Abul Fazl now guards and protects you, nobody can touch you. He lived his whole life, Abul Fazl, just sacrificing for the Ahlul Bayt. So now Muawiyah now understood that now the guard there is Abbas. What do? It has to be an inside job now. And then of course he summons Ju'ada, the second wife of Imam Mujtaba, offers her 100,000 dirhams, some reports say, to take this poison that I got from Rome and somehow get it inside the water of Imam Mujtaba alayhi salatu wasalam. The reports say that Imam Mujtaba was sleeping at night. He was there in the same room. Beside him was Imam Hussein. In a room just adjacent was Bibi Zainab. Both brother and sister loved Imam Hassan very much. They would protect him at all costs. And even, his nights were very restless. Imagine now turning over. Any movement would be painful for Imam Mujtaba. In the middle of the night, they say that Ju'ada now snuck inside the room of Imam Mujtaba, dropped a few drops of the poison inside the water, left the room. Now Imam Mujtaba now knew. They knew. He got up now. He was about to drink that water. Bibi Zainab, now some report says, Bhaiya, I will give you that water. Come, why are you doing so much zahmat and waking up. But Imam Mujtaba knew that this was a different type of water. He says, Zainab, you stay where you are, please. Imam Mujtaba now looks at the water. His lips are moving, some reports say. But what is read is not the dua to be read before water. What could have been read is Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمري. One brother on Asri Ashur with Ali Asghar on his arms saying Inna Lillah. One brother now about to drink poisonous water saying Inna Lillah. Imam Mujtaba now drinks the water. Only a small little sip was enough now to destroy the man from the inside. They say he fell from his bed, turning on his back, turning on his stomach now. Pieces of his liver now coming out. Zainab comes running. Imam Hussein comes running. Everyone now is there. Imam Mujtaba now begins now to get weaker and weaker. His whole color is changing. He looks at Imam Hussein. Imam Hussein is watching his brother go through all this pain. He begins to cry. Tears rolling down Imam Hussein's face. Imam Mujtaba says, Bhaiya Hussein, don't cry. Don't cry. There'll be no day like your day. You're all around me. There'll come a time where you will be there on Asri Ashur, surrounded not by family, not by the ashab, but thousands and thousands of the enemies. Imam Mujtaba's now Mayat is prepared, taken from his home towards Baqi. It's rested there. Some reports say that 70 arrows came and begin now to hit the grave and hit the coffin and tabut of Imam Mujtaba. Imam Hussein now grabs the tabut with Abul Fazl and the rest of them, bring them back to the house. Zainab sees Imam Mujtaba coming back. This time they say with 70 different arrows. Imam Hussein says, Zainab, come and help me. Take out one arrow at a time. On one side is Zainab, on one side is Hussein, taking out the arrows of Imam Mujtaba's tabut. How lucky are you, Imam Hassan? Those arrows are being removed from you. But my Mawla Hussein, Asri Ashur, what could Zainab be thinking that when Imam Hassan now had arrows, I took them out one by one. I'm leaving towards Kufa and Sham, Bhaiya. You're lying there with arrows in your body. I can't take one arrow out. سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. We ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to accept this qaleel ibadat, inshallah. We ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to give us that tawfiq, inshallah, to fight those inner demons inside of us. We ask you, Allah, to weaken the hands of the enemies of humanity, to strengthen the mustaza'afin and the oppressed wherever they are in the world. And finally, Allah, we have one dua on the night of the shahadat of Imam Mujtaba, that we ask you, Allah, to please make us worthy of the Imam of our time. Allow us to stand beside him when he comes. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
आता जनाजा है पीटो सर है ले अज़ा आता जनाज़ा है जुदाए मलऊन ने ज़हरे हलाहल दिया ज़हर से मारा गया आता जनाज़ा है।
「あたじゃなさはい」 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 ۖ「あたじゃなさはい」 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 ۖ
مروان نے ملعون نے تیروں کی بارش کیا تیروں سے چیدہ گیا آتا جنازہ ہے فوج ملک ساتھ ہے سر کھلے جبریل ہے شور یہی ہے بپا آتا جنازہ ہے فاطمہ فردوس سے نکلی ہے سر پیٹتی کہتی ہوئی اہل عذاب آتا جنازہ ہے زینب مغموم بھی روتی ہے سر پیٹتی ماتم و گل ہے بپا آتا جنازہ ہے شور ہے محشر بپا روتے ہیں آل ابا ہائے یہ کیا ہو گیا آتا جنازہ ہے یا حسین یا حسین یا حسن یا حسن کہتی تھی زینب خاصتاً بھائی حسن بائی حسن کہتی تھی زینب خاصتاً بائی حسن بائی حسن کہتی تھی زینب خاصتاً بائی حسن بائی حسن کہتی تھی زینب خاصتاً بھائی حسن بھائی حسن دیکھو میرا رنجو مہن بھائی حسن بھائی حسن کہتی تھی زینب خاصتاً بھائی حسن بھائی حسن کہتی تھی زینب خاصتاً بھائی حسن بھائی حسن سب جان کھوتے ہیں اٹھو شبیر روتے ہیں اٹھو سب جان کھوتے ہیں اٹھو شبیر روتے ہیں اٹھو ہے جام لب غم سے بہن بھائی حسن بھائی حسن کہتی تھی زینب خاصتاً بھائی حسن بھائی حسن کہتی تھی زینب خاصتاً بھائی حسن بھائی حسن خوبی ہے یہ تقدیر کی رونے کو میں جیتی رہی خوبی ہے یہ تقدیر کی رونے کو میں جیتی رہی سوتے ہو تم پہنے کفن بھائی حسن بھائی حسن کہتی تھی زینب خاصتاً بھائی حسن بھائی حسن کہتی تھی زینب خاصتاً بھائی حسن بھائی حسن زہرا کی گودی کے پلے مرکد میں سونے کو چلے زہرا کی گودی کے پلے مرکد میں سونے کو چلے اے مصطفیٰ کے جان و تن بھائی حسن بھائی حسن کہتی تھی زینب خاصتاً بھائی حسن بھائی حسن کہتی تھی زینب خاصتاً بھائی حسن بھائی حسن کیسا وہ قاتل زہر تھا کیسا غضب یہ ہو گیا کیسا وہ قاتل زہر تھا کیسا غضب یہ ہو گیا نیلا ہے سب گل سا بدن بھائی حسن بھائی حسن کہتی تھی زینب خاصتاً بھائی حسن بھائی حسن کہتی تھی زینب خاصتاً بھائی حسن بھائی حسن اماں موئی نانا موئے بابا موئے اور تم چلے اماں موئی نانا موئے بابا موئے اور تم چلے اب کیا کرے ذکر بہن بھائی حسن بھائی حسن کہتی تھی زینب خاصتاً بھائی حسن بھائی حسن کہتی تھی زینب خاصتاً بھائی حسن بھائی حسن دیکھو ذرا قاسم کا سن اس کے یتیمی کے تھے دن دیکھو ذرا قاسم کا سن اس کے یتیمی کے تھے دن روتے ہیں بھائی خاصتاً بھائی حسن بھائی حسن کہتی تھی زینب خاصتاً بھائی حسن بھائی حسن کہتی تھی زینب خاصتاً بھائی حسن بھائی حسن یا حسن یا حسن یا حسن یا حسن
مارا گیا سبط رسول دوسرا حسن سبز کباب بے گناہ مارا گیا سبط رسول دوسرا حسن سبز کباب بے گناہ مارا گیا سبط رسول دوسرا حسن سبز کباب بے گناہ مارا گیا سبط رسول دوسرا حسن سبز کباب اگلتے ہوئے بھائی کو بہن نے دیکھا اور تڑپ کر یہ کہا تیری غربت پہ بھائی تیری زینب ہو فدا حسن سبز کباب بے گناہ مارا گیا سبط رسول دوسرا حسن سبز کباب بے گناہ مارا گیا سبط رسول دوسرا حسن سبز کباب بے گناہ مارا گیا سبط رسول دوسرا حسن سبز کباب بے گناہ مارا گیا سبط رسول دوسرا حسن سبز کباب اگلتے ہوئے بھائی کو بہن نے دیکھا اور تڑپ کر یہ کہا تیری غربت پہ بھائی تیری زینب ہو فدا حسن سبز کباب بے گناہ مارا گیا سبط رسول دوسرا حسن سبز کباب بے گناہ مارا گیا سبط رسول دوسرا حسن سبز کباب بے گناہ مارا گیا سبط رسول دوسرا حسن سبز کباب ماں کے دکھ سے ابھی آزاد کہاں تھی زینب ہو گیا کیسا غضب باپ زندہ نہ رہا بھائی سوئے خلد گیا حسن سبز کباب بے گناہ مارا گیا سبط رسول دوسرا حسن سبز کباب بے گناہ مارا گیا سبط رسول دوسرا حسن سبز کباب بے گناہ مارا گیا سبط رسول دوسرا حسن سبز کباب بے گناہ مارا گیا سبط رسول دوسرا حسن سبز کباب کر دیے زہر حلال نے جگر کے ٹکڑے اور قاسم کے لیے کم سنی میں ہے یہ غم شام غریبا جیسا حسن سبز کباب بے گناہ مارا گیا سبط رسول دوسرا حسن سبز کباب بے گناہ مارا گیا سبط رسول دوسرا حسن سبز کباب بے گناہ مارا گیا سبط رسول دوسرا حسن سبز کباب بے گناہ مارا گیا سبط رسول دوسرا حسن سبز کباب گھر سے ایک بار جنازہ جو نکل جاتا ہے کب وہ پھر آتا ہے ایسا تابوت ہے یہ لوٹ کے جو گھر آیا حسن سبز کباب بے گناہ مارا گیا سبط رسول دوسرا حسن سبز کباب بے گناہ مارا گیا سبط رسول دوسرا حسن سبز کباب بے گناہ مارا گیا سبط رسول دوسرا حسن سبز کباب بے گناہ مارا گیا سبط رسول دوسرا حسن سبز کباب بھائی کی لاش کو غازی نے تڑپ کر دیکھا اور سرور سے کہا اور سرور سے کہا اب تو دے دیجئے آقا مجھے لڑنے کی رضا حسن سبز کباب شہ نے اس وقت جو غازی کو نہ روکا ہوتا حشر ہو جاتا بپا حشر ہو جاتا بپا تیرے آتے نہ جنازے پہ تمہارے مولا حسن سبز کباب بے گناہ مارا گیا سبت رسول دوسرا حسن سبز کباب بے گناہ مارا گیا سبت رسول دوسرا حسن سبز کباب بے گناہ مارا گیا سبت رسول دوسرا حسن سبز کباب بے گناہ مارا گیا سبت رسول دوسرا حسن سبز کباب بھائی کی لاش کو غازی نے تڑپ کر دیکھا اور سرور سے کہا اور سرور سے کہا اب تو دے دیجئے آقا مجھے لڑنے کی رضا حسن سبز کباب شہ نے اس وقت جو غازی کو نہ روکا ہوتا حشر ہو جاتا بپا حشر ہو جاتا بپا تیرے آتے نہ جنازے پہ تمہارے مولا حسن سبز کباب بے گناہ مارا گیا سبت رسول دوسرا حسن سبز کباب بے گناہ مارا گیا سبت رسول دوسرا حسن سبز کباب بے گناہ مارا گیا سبت رسول دوسرا حسن سبز کباب بے گناہ مارا گیا سبت رسول دوسرا حسن سبز کباب شہ کو ریحان برادر کا جگر یاد آیا جب سرے کرب و بلا جب سرے کرب و بلا پھر قاسم کے اٹھاتے ہوئے مولا نے کہا حسن سبز کباب بے گناہ مارا گیا سبت رسول دوسرا حسن سبز کباب بے گناہ مارا گیا سبت رسول دوسرا حسن سبز کباب بے گناہ مارا گیا سبت رسول دوسرا حسن سبز کباب بے گناہ مارا گیا سبت رسول دوسرا حسن سبز کباب سر سے ٹکڑے جگر خون سے کفن لال ہوا حسن سبز کباب بے گناہ مارا گیا سبت رسول دوسرا حسن سبز کباب
اور محمد وآل محمد صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم
ان شاء الله. السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا نبي الله، السلام عليك يا حبيب الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين سيد الوسيين، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا ابن رسول رب العالمين، السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء، السلام عليك يا حبيب الله، السلام عليك يا صفوة الله، السلام عليك يا أمين الله، السلام عليك يا حجة الله، السلام عليك يا نور الله، السلام عليك يا صراط الله، السلام عليك يا بيان حكم الله، السلام عليك يا ناصر دين الله، السلام عليك أيها السيد الزكي، السلام عليك أيها البر الوفي، السلام عليك أيها القائم الأمين. السلام عليك أيها العالم بالتاويل. السلام عليك أيها الهادي المهدي. السلام عليك أيها الطاهر الزكي. السلام عليك أيها التقي النقي. السلام عليك أيها الحق الحقيق. السلام عليك أيها الشهيد الصديق. السلام عليك يا أبا محمد الحسن بن علي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام عليكم يا شهداء كربلاء جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء ومعين الضعفاء والفقراء. السلطان أبا الحسن مولانا علي بن موسى الرضا، كن شفيعنا وشفيع والدينا في يوم الجزاء. السلام عليك وعلى أختك فاطمة المعصومة ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا حجة ابن الحسن، يا مولانا يا صاحب العصر والزمان، سيدي الأمان 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 من فتن الزمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا قعبة الإيمان. السلام عليك يا إمامنا وإمام الإنس والجان. أجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك وزهورك ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كل وليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقاعدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا، حتى تسكنه أرضك توعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد.